Good afternoon, everyone. So pleased you could be here for the last full session of the day before our reception. I hope you've gotten as much out of today's discussions and meetings and keynote speeches as I have. It's been a thrilling day to see so many new faces and also to reconnect with some old friends. I hope that the next 60 minutes will leave you wanting more, because we're going to give you an awful lot, and we're pretty excited about this session. It's called 30 Aha Moments in 60 Minutes to Optimize Your Marketing Strategy. It's a long title, and it says a lot about the expertise up on this dais with me. So I have Derek Fairfield, Brian Hall, Stephanie Nash, Corey Knuckles, Don Rashino, and Rebecca Ryan. And these folks represent part of the brain trust of our industry, and they want to share with you some of the things that they've learned over the years in their own experience and in working with many of you in this room. So say hi, everybody. Wave.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
They're a good-looking crew, I tell you. I'm excited. So the format for today is relatively PowerPoint light, which I'm excited about. We wanted to find a way to deliver to you as many aha moments as we could in a relatively short amount of time. So it's mostly a Q&A structure with these fine folks up on the stage. And I've asked them to think about some key themes. We did a little planning in advance. And these are the key themes that we're going to walk through over the next 60 minutes. And by the way, if you could start the timer so I know when I'm running out of time and I have to move us along, that would be great. If along the way you want to follow, I have a few of the Twitter handles up here as well as a hashtag. So I figure in not only talking about best practices, maybe we ought to practice them as well. So please feel free to get online. That way I know if you're looking at your phones, you're doing it in the context of this session and not just checking your email. So with that said, I'm going to dig into the first audience. The format's going to go as follows. We're going to start with a key theme. You're going to see some of the keywords that are coming up, and then I'm going to ask the panelists to share some of their aha moments. We'll leave a little bit of time at the end, but if you're really eager, I invite you to interrupt. You're welcome to shout it out, to throw stuff up here, or to stand at the mic and just let me know you have a question. I also welcome your observations, so if there are things that you've done in your own practice, at your own company or organization, please feel free to weigh in at the end. So with that, let's start with the audience. And here's some of the things that we're going to talk about in audience. Remember, we've got 5 themes that we're going to walk through over the next 58 minutes. And so let's start in with Derek. When it comes to audience, I know you're a big fan of segmentation, and I'd like you to talk to the group for just a minute about segmentation and what your big aha moment is there.
Yeah, so I think segmentation in today's world, there's so much frenzy in marketing, and a lot of the customers I engage with just have their plates really full of trying to get campaigns out the door and maybe aren't giving themselves enough time for segmentation. So I encourage customers I work with to really sit back and think of who should see their message. Who's the influencer? I think it's kind of easy to get caught up in my product is targeted towards first grade teachers, so let's just hit every first grade teacher. That's really not segmentation. I think we need to take the time as marketers to go down the next level and think about beyond a job title, what else is there? There's so many demographics you can target on. There's behaviors we can target on. Are you keeping? Are we keeping track of who's engaging with us in the past across channels, email, social, and other channels, and using that to further refine segmentation time over time and kind of keep that practice alive. So segmentation could shift. Maybe you think certain folks are using your products, your tools, your services, and you can find out through marketing behavior, doing analytics on your file, really spending the time. And if it doesn't feel like it's a core strength of yours, your marketing partners can help you. There's probably other folks in your organization. So I think we could have the best message in the world. If the right person doesn't see it, it's very ineffective.
So if job title is the first common point of segmentation that most companies use, is there a next common item that people use to segment? Is it geography might be one that's pretty common? Work down the levels of depth that you go to, just real quick.
Sure. Job title, location, school type. People make assumptions all the time. Oh, nobody in private schools uses my products. If you do some kind of analysis on your customer file, you can find out those answers. But I would say job title seems to be kind of the ubiquitous, but it should go a lot deeper than that.
Should go a lot deeper. Okay. Well, Corey, talk about context. When you were sharing some of your notes as it relates to audience, you used the word context. And what does that mean for you? And how can folks here apply context to their thinking about audience?
Yeah, actually, in terms of the word segmentation, in this case, context sort of speaks to situational segmentation, understanding situational need states that your consumer, your target audience has. And I like to think of it as demand moments, when they have demand either to learn more about the product that you provide, or they have demand to use the product that you provide. And so understanding the 5 W's of those demand moments, the who, what, where, when, and why. Think about yourself as sort of a reporter or an investigator when you're trying to learn more about your target and their situational needs. And so what this allows you to do basically is what we like to call meet them where they're at. And so if you know the who, what, where, when, and why, you're able to dig in and really provide content that really meets their needs, gives them an experience that really delivers on what they need, when they need it, and how they need it in that moment in time.
So that's interesting. So you talked about demand moments, and demand gen I always think of as trying to generate demand for our product. But if I'm hearing you, that we should also be thinking about the different demands that, like, for information.
Exactly.
Or for value, things like that.
All the way through the customer journey. And one way you can actually do this is to get into interviews with folks that are in your target audience and have these demand moment interviews. And I like to call them brand habitat, because you're getting into their world, right? And you're understanding their usage situations and really identifying those 5 W's.
So you would suggest marketers go out and interview customers and prospects? Yeah,
I've done that many times, actually. And even for each segment that Derek was talking about, you only need a handful. It's an hour, 2 hours, and a lot of times the travel is a bit for you, but well worth the investment.
Rebecca, you talked about place and time. So one of the key things that you've talked about is find them at the right place, the right time. Talk about that as it relates to audience.
I think it's interesting because it builds off of both of what these guys are saying, is that it's not just about the segment, but it's about where they are and what channels they're using at what time. So you might find that anecdotally we've got a lot of STEM folks on Twitter. We look at the data and find that that's what we're seeing. Well, they're not just on there generally. They're there at certain times doing certain things. So try to look at your data, look at who's responding in what way, and really look at trying to find your segment in the right location. I don't know if that's sorry.
So are you saying that some of your programs you'll say like 7 p.m. on Sundays is when you target a program?
If you're going to start tweeting, find the time when you've got, if you know that you're talking to science teachers, there are science chats on Twitter. If you know that you're talking to K through 2 art teachers, you're not going to focus on the times when those folks are not doing that behavior. You might go to Pinterest instead, and because that's the time when they'd be, or the location they'd be likely to be. So it comes down to don't sell, try to sell Yankees parkas to Boston moms in July.
Got it. Okay. And being a Red Sox fan, and sometimes a mom, I would never buy Yankees.
Yeah, and don't ever sell Steelers anything to anybody, because the Steelers are the worst. Moving right on. I knew somebody would have to.
You get out. That's good. Stephanie, you like to talk about motivations, and so it sounds like we're building on some themes here. But if we're finding the right people, giving them context at the right time, then help me unpack motivations. How do you go about finding motivations for an audience?
So teachers, as we all know, they work hard. They're constantly being asked to do more with less. And one of their biggest barriers is time. So even if we're meeting them in the right places, we're giving them the information they want, there's always that barrier of, is this worth the time of implementation? And that is a real challenge for teachers. So we kind of have to say, how can we, there I am, hello. How can we show them that it's worth their while, it's worth their time, it's worth their effort. They're very motivated by what's going to help their kids, but they already have processes in place, and sometimes it's really difficult to make that hurdle of adoption. So we like to use words like proven, right, in our marketing. We're marketers, we have all of our buzzwords. That doesn't mean anything to teachers. They want to see that it's proven. They want to hear a testimonial from another teacher. They want to hear about it from their colleagues. so that they are going to make the leap to incorporate it. Recently, we were working with a partner at the beginning of the school year, a parent communication app, and we saw a teacher comment that said, "This sounds great. I'm already using this other tool. I want to see what other teachers have to say about this throughout the year. It sounds like something I'd want to do, but I kind of want to see what's going to happen." Again, this teacher was looking to see, is it going to be worth the barrier of time to implement it for me?
Okay, so helping your prospects see that it's worth it. Got it. Okay. And before I switch gears to our next theme, I want to ask about venues, because it occurs to me that we in this room spend a lot of time on the road at trade shows and exhibit halls and things like that. Don, can you speak to maybe an aha moment you had when it comes to relying on venues as a place to meet your audience?
Yeah, I'm still a big fan of trade shows. I still think if you can meet your customer, prospective customer, where they are, and get that face time, but do it in maybe different ways instead of just product demos. It's, I think, something that maybe Rob had touched on this morning about getting other educators to really share their experiences and what best practices have come about as, with engaging with your brand. But then to be smart about your trade show approach in using social and using email, prior to be able to go to a trade show, and make sure that you have some special events planned. You have the green lights on? Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Sort of?
Ish.
I'll talk louder for a minute until they get the mic fixed. But trade shows, again, if you're going to go and take that expense, make sure that you're using email and social media in advance of that to start engaging who's potentially going to be there. And you might have a much more fruitful event. And especially if you already have a pretty good following, doing special events associated with trade shows are still a great best practice and highly recommended. Okay.
And again, I welcome people to offer their own ideas either now or at the end. I know trade shows are tough. I advise a lot of companies, and they suck up a lot of budget. So it sounds like we have to think differently about how to use them. One thing I want to do as we transition between themes is give you little tips that are maybe outside marketing but might be helpful. So let's see if this works. I asked each of the panels to contribute their favorite shortcut keys. And so we're going to add a few as we go. If you write nothing else down, at least one of these is going to change your life. It's really going to be kind of amazing. So this is a fun one where you paste special so you can select formatting. That's pretty cool. I spend a lot of time trying to match formatting, so I'm already putting this one in my wheelhouse. Did you all write it down? Okay, good.
That was my idea, by the way.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
Brilliant. Well done.
All right. So the next theme I want to talk about is planning. And again, what we wanted to do is come up with we wanted to cover an awful lot. So we're just doing bite-sized bits of aha moments in some key areas of marketing. And one of them that came up was planning. And this is really interesting to me because I hadn't expected some of these keywords, but it occurred to me that, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There are some assumptions we make about planning as marketers, and there are some missteps that I see quite commonly. And yes, I make them too, so I guess I know them pretty well. So, Brian, you mentioned calendaring. Why did that come up for you as a key aha moment?
Well, first, I'm glad you came back to me because I thought you were just skipping
through the panel. The glory is here. Okay. The stage is yours. Go for it.
A couple reasons why I feel that the calendar is sometimes an underutilized tool. And when I talk about calendar, I'm really talking about it being a visual a tool. For one, it really can help you see how you're fully integrating your marketing plan. Are you incorporating all the different channels? So it gives you a really nice visual to be able to not only use as your own tool, but then it also gives you something that you can use cross-functionally to get buy-in, provide some transparency throughout not only a product management team, but especially a sales team, because I think we often in marketing forget about our partners in sales, and there can really be a powerful connection if you can also share that plan, get input with that plan, and have something available for sales to take a look at. The other thing is I also encourage the calendar to be something that you use not just for a product launch, but look at the calendar for the full year, depending regardless of where your product may be in its life cycle. So if it's a product that's been revised or it's something that's being sunset, a calendar is still going to help you plan across the different channels exactly what you want to do and when you want to do it, looking at the windows of opportunities that we know we have within the education market, back to school, spring buying time, teacher of the week. There's lots of different windows.
All right, show of hands in the crowd if you have a great feeling about your marketing calendar in your company.
Yes.
Okay, so there's like 3 of you who feel really good about your marketing calendar.
Well done.
So it seems like this theme was pretty important. Sounds like the seasonal nature of this is pretty important. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I always thought of our marketing calendar as being just sort of the technical representation of a greater conversation we were trying to have with our prospective customers and current customers. There are these natural ebbs and flows of the various different segments that you serve within the education space, and certain times to talk about certain things, especially your sales reps know that. But being in sync with that and having your calendar reflect that is just huge. And I'd echo what Brian said, but I take it even a step further. Is everyone in here probably has some sort of a national sales conference of some kind. Really unveiling that as you talk about your themes and the general conversation you're trying to have with the customer or those that you're trying to get as customers, and unveiling that at a sales conference can have huge impact because it'll get your sales reps to start to really adjust their activities. I saw that. We didn't used to do a calendar, except that one was internal. We didn't share it with sales. It was a huge mistake on our part. So the aha moment was once we started sharing it, all of our sales reps really adjusted their activities and their own marketing activities to be in sync with ours.
Okay, so for you folks, and again, it's like all but 3 of you, you have to go create a calendar, do that, and then you have to share it with others. That's the other really important point. So it seems simple, but I can't help but notice that we've all got a lot of work to do. As far as planning out your calendar, Rebecca, I'd like you to talk about your content calendar. I know it's really important to your marketing efforts, so talk about how you plan for content in the context of marketing.
I think the first thing that we like to talk about is what's the what, right? So you want to make sure that your content is, in addition to being useful and interesting and fun, and earlier today we talked a little bit about SEO, and about adding to make sure that's unique also. Those things all have to fall within your seasonal strategies and within your calendar. So making your content relate to things that teachers are thinking about, or that it's not just necessarily the selling cycle, but what they're thinking about, what they're doing in their classrooms, and what matters to them at different times of the year.
Give me an example of something that matters to them.
I almost always use the season when they're working on science fairs as sort of, or Invention Month, or, there could be any number of things that they're thinking about at certain times. I'm getting ready to teach. I'm setting up my calendar thinking about Earth Week or Earth Day, those types of things. So when do you put that into your calendar? Do you do it on Earth Day? You probably do it a little bit earlier so that they're preparing for it and they're thinking about it and searching for things.
Do trial offers work? If you're planning out your calendar for the year and you have to deal with sales, how do you plan for trial offers? I know I just jumped out, but that's a really interesting one, and I want to keep us on our toes. So, Brian, I'm going to turn to you.
I'm a big believer in kind of the trial offers because I think like we are as consumers, everybody wants to test drive a product before they actually are going to buy it. I think there's a few simple tips because all the products can be from a digital to a print, and now that we're getting into more to the digital, I think the importance and kind of what I've learned having started in print, and it was really easy just to send out a sample chapter. It was really easy to send out a full textbook for somebody to examine. And now that we've gotten to digital, I think it's about making it simple for them to try it, but it's also making it real for them. So if you are going to give somebody a 30-day trial, don't give them a 30-day trial if they actually need to experience your product for 90 days, for example. And I think that's a key part of planning as you even look at your product development and the release of a product, making sure that you have a very clear campaign and clear strategies around how you're going to get your product seeded into the market so people can actually experience it before they make a buying decision within a proper time frame.
Is that a sales managed process or a marketing managed process? So who manages trial offers in an organization? I suppose it depends, but who would you rather see managing the whole free trial offer experience?
I would like to see marketing be a key owner, but I think sales is a partner in that. And the other thing I would say why it makes sense for marketing is just because you get somebody into a trial, and even if sales is starting to communicate with them, it's marketing's responsibility to keep that conversation going and continue to follow up with them and nurture them. So that's why I'd advocate for it to be a predominantly marketing responsibility.
It's a big bet to place, to make a portion of your product available for free, or maybe in some cases available for a year before they make a full commitment. Corey, talk about placing strategic bets. Talk about placing small bets.
And this ties in really well, I think, to what Brian was just talking about in a little bit different context about making it real. I'm just going to throw out a question right now to you guys. You know, what does Chris Rock, Apple, and the filmmakers at Pixar all have in common? It's basically they all place small strategic bets. They get quickly into small testable prototypes that they can put out in front of their target audience, and then basically learn very quickly, actually, with little insights throughout the process. Instead of, what happens a lot of times at companies that I've seen, have done innovation for a number of years, is that you end up talking to yourself quite a bit about, the ideas that you're trying to put out there, that you're trying to create for your audience before you ever speak to your audience. And so what Brian mentioned was making it real. When you get a small prototype, it gives them something meaningful, tangible, actually, to respond to. So if you move it quickly, you're not spending near as much money trying to get to that place, and you're learning more meaningful insights while also streamlining the process.
So there's two things I take from that. One is, in your own planning process, try and forecast the small strategic bets that you might place as a marketer. But I'm also hearing, the flip side of that coin is, allow your prospective customers to place a small bet with you.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. Interesting. Don, you mentioned video. The planning process for video is fascinating. I work with a client who's probably in this room who's very good at it, especially animated videos. They pull it off exceptionally well, and I take no credit for that other than enjoy watching them work. But I see a lot of companies struggle with video. So from a planning purpose, you have 20 seconds now to tell me, how do we do video right?
Again, I think it's like my earlier comment about what conversation do you really want to have with your prospective customer? What storyline is special or unique about your brand that you can share in bite-sized assets and use throughout your content marketing strategy to get your story across?
Do you do real video or animation?
You can do both, but I would highly recommend real video, especially if you have an emotional story to tell. I mean, we are emotional beings. We make buying decisions that are often emotional. And so if your story, in education, it's likely you have an emotional, passionate story, can be shared from thought leaders on your team or from your customers about the impact of your product. If you can do that with video, you're going to have an effective campaign.
Should we do 30-second videos, 2 minutes, 7 minutes? Pick one.
It depends on how often you want to use it.
Pick
30
one.
seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, 30 seconds. That's our target. All right. So let's move on. Our next shortcut key. Anyone know this? Show of hands. Did you already know this? You liar. You didn't know this one. You did? Wow. Oh, you found it by accident. Oh, yeah. Okay. That I believe. That's good. Okay, I get that. This is a good one. Refreshes the browser page. Especially good. You'll see your associates doing this as you walk by their desk. So the next theme we're going to talk about is messaging. And this is a fun one because this is what we're trying to figure out every day. And so we have a lot to cover. And I want to start with Stephanie because she mentioned educator speak. So what does that mean?
So it builds a little bit on what I started mentioning before. When we want to say our product is proven, right? That doesn't really have much meaning for an educator. Buzzwords in general, education speak, right? All of the sort of Common Core, standards aligned, that does not resonate with educators. It goes back to what I was talking about before. Why should it be worth their while? So instead of words like solutions and utilize and leverage, teachers don't want to hear about that. They don't want to hear that you have a proven, effective solution for the next generation of writers. They want to hear that you have a quick assessment that's fun for kids and easy to do in class. We want to talk to them like they're people. in normal language, everyday language, right? We get very excited about our product, and we know it is a proven, effective solution that's going to help the next generation of writers, and we really want to tell them about it. But we really have to, kind of like Rebecca was saying before, what's the what? Why does it matter? They don't want to know about a solution. Okay, they want to know what it's going to do for them in their classroom. How's it going to make their life easier? How is it going to help them help kids? So really try to simplify that language and meet them where they're at and talk the teacher talk.
So, Rebecca, students or kids, how do we refer to them? Because I hear this come up quite a bit. Anyone else ever had this discussion in their company? Well, we can't call them kids, they're students. I don't know.
I don't know. I've gone back and forth too. I mean, it depends. I think it depends on the audience. I'm going to go back to know your audience. Some segments, I think, respond better to students than to kids.
So taking this to segmentation, how would you play that out, Derek?
Well, I think you really have to look at
No, I mean the students versus kids issue.
how would I segment on
Yeah,
it?
what segment uses students, which uses kids?
I think obviously, in my opinion, the younger grade ranges, maybe three and below, you could probably get away better talking as kids. But I think it depends on what you're talking about.
Okay, give me an example. Or what do you mean by that?
I think if you're Crayola and you're talking about a fun activity, it's kids. If you're talking to a curriculum director at a district, they're probably students.
And so what you're trying to get at is relevance and authenticity. That's a word that's come up quite a bit, including in some of today's discussions that I've had offline. So Don, how do you get to authenticity? It's almost like planning to be spontaneous. Like, how do you actually become authentic? I want to be authentic.
Oh, it's a huge issue. This came up actually in the last session that I was in. If you're not authentic, educators will spot you a mile away, and they can smell a rat. So I would say, learning from an experience that I had at a trade show, I had an educator walk up to me after talking about a product, and she said, "Thank you so much for not insulting me or talking down to me." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? What happened?" And she pointed at another booth and said, "They told me that they could make me a better teacher with their product." And so I asked that salesperson, "Well, how long were you in the classroom?" And that person had never been in the classroom. So whether that's, in-person engagement or it's through social channels, you need to be authentic. And I would give a resource to everybody in this room that I shared in the last session. If you go to a website, edcircuit.com, just search for Richard Byrne. Many of you may know who he is. He's a well-known blogger. He has a website called freetechforteachers.com. He wrote a great column on that site called EdTech Startups Stop Talking Down to Teachers. So if you're wondering how to speak in an authentic way or what not to do, it's a great resource because educators will see you coming a mile away.
That's a scary proposition. Okay, good. Think on that for a while. Let me go to Brian. Let's talk about features versus benefits, and let's be authentic when we talk about it, okay? And help me understand when we should do one versus the other. I see this conversation come up a lot with my clients and salespeople. Some of them that I've worked with, the reps, go right into feature mode. Marketers say, no, you got to pull back to benefits, and they're not being authentic with each other in that conversation. It's very frustrating. So talk to me about how we're messaging a proper balance of features and benefits.
So I think this has actually been a pretty big shift in our industry where it used to be okay to lead with features and benefits around our products and services. But as our targets have gotten smarter and they're starting to act more like consumers, I think it's changed to the point where we need to engage them with content. And everybody's heard about content marketing, engaging, make it relevant. And I think that's all very true. At the same time, I think features and benefits, it gets a bad rap. So I'm not saying abandon features and benefit. What I'm saying is engage them first with all the great content, the thought leadership material that we've been talking about this week or so far today, and then feature and benefit will have its place and time. Once you have them in the conversation, they may start asking you for the features and benefits, and you don't even have to present it to them other than giving them some sort of piece of paper or sending them something. But I think it's sort of flipped. It used to be lead with features and benefits, and that was all you needed. Now I think it's engage them with the content, give them something that's of value, and then turn them over to the feature and benefit.
So help me understand the content that we're talking about. Content is like this big thing, and I need to get more tangible with that. So when you talk about content, and this is open to the panel now, are you trying to articulate a problem that people will identify with? Are you trying to articulate an aspiration that people will identify with? I'm not sure sometimes which we think is the best to lead with. So who wants to jump on that one, Don?
Maybe I will. I think it's being able to relate to your prospective customer, current customer, with what challenges are they really facing. And that really speaks to authenticity. It means you've done their homework. If you've done it right, you can really address sort of those pain points and position your product or your brand as someone who has experience with that and being able to solve those problems.
So Rebecca, put that in the context of an email subject line. Anyone been involved in planning an email subject line? Please raise your hands. Come on, all of you have, because you've either mapped one out or you've responded to one that your company sent and said, that was terrible, we should have done this. So you've all done it. So tell us right now, what's the best thing we can do for subject lines?
Absolutely start with free Common Core, all exclamation points, and maybe like some smileys. That'll get the open right away.
Got it. Common Core. How many exclamation points?
At least 6.
6.
And on sale today.
Yes,
Four
so
is
the
the standard.
scarcity. You got to deal with scarcity call to action immediately in the subject line.
Okay, good. Writing it down. Yep. I don't think that was an authentic answer. I don't. So give us some of the things that we should be doing.
Well, I think for sure we need to get back to the segmentation and to the audience again. We're going to keep saying this over and over again. It needs to be relevant to them. It needs to tell them what's in it for them. And it needs to be short. It can't drag off the edge. You've got to have short, urgent messaging, but not an urgent sense of it's closing now, open, open, open. So you've got to make sure that it's professional, it's got an action item, and that it's relevant to the user. Again, it comes down to it. Are you sending them the message they need at the time that they need it?
Okay.
I tag on with that, kind of going to what Brian said. I don't think a subject line should be full of features. It's about them as a human, as somebody said earlier, and what we're promoting in the email do for them, not product specs, not features. This is the best tool for solving X, Y, and Z. Get them. How many emails do we have in our inbox? I think I have like 800 from today. So it's got to speak to them quickly, as Rebecca said, but it can't be product speak. It has to be relevant to them and how they think.
It was interesting. When I was walking through the floors of ISTE, I met up with someone who had been there for the first time, and she worked at a nonprofit doing a photojournalism review. It was very interesting, and she was walking around. She kept asking herself, "Where's the humanity in all this?" That exhibit floor was just brand and bright lights. It was like I started thinking of it as like a giant Chuck E. Cheese for adults, where it just played games and had impersonators and just running around hyped up on sugar. So I do sense there was a lack of humanity, but I sense that it's hard to do that in an email. Is that where the content comes in? Is that where we're trying to do like human interest stories in our content marketing? Stephanie?
You mean right in the email or where
in
we're
the
driving
email
into?
Or blend it over to content?
I
It's
think
an interesting theme that just kind of popped into my head here.
Right. I think in the email, less is more. You want to get them somewhere. So, again, that human connection in the subject line, getting the open, and then once they click through, where are you bringing them? Are you bringing them somewhere that's going to be relevant to them? And, of course, we've been talking about relevance this whole time. And we could say, for example, that talking to teachers about how to incorporate nonfiction is relevant. 7 ways to incorporate nonfiction aligned with Common Core. Is that relevant to teachers? Yes, it is. Do they want to read that? Probably not. You might do something different, like ways to make nonfiction less boring, ways to incorporate nonfiction that's a little bit more joyful, because that is a real pain point for teachers. They know they have to implement some of these standards, and it's maybe a little bit of a change for them. And they see their students. I see my daughter coming home and complaining about how much nonfiction she has to read. So how can we connect with teachers and say, we see that this probably isn't any fun for you, and it's not where your heart is. Let us help you get there. I think that's really the way with content, to connect with them.
I think too, just to build on that, that's authentic. That's a voice that really resonates. That's we get you and we understand. It's not saying, here's your 7 things. It's a real moment of connecting with a human being that is having a challenge that you can help meet.
And I think have a sense of humor. I think we have a tendency oftentimes to be a little too academic and worry that we're going to turn somebody off by saying something funny or something a little edgy. I'm not saying get too edgy, but I think there's definitely an opportunity for you to show a sense of humor to really bring people in and have some fun.
And to keep coming back to it, we keep coming back to this. Educators are people. They have the same cultural experience as we do. So the language that's being used that you're seeing on Facebook or that you read on Twitter or BuzzFeed, those things are all part of their lives too. They're not in these little bubbles of academia where they never get exposed to television. I mean, there's things that you can use that are funny and interesting and warm and human.
Well, assuming we do it all well, we need to measure that. So we're going to move into some of the measures that you talked about. But before that, we're going to go with an oldie but a goodie, which is how to print. A lot of you forgot this was an option. So simple Control P, use it. It'll save you seconds a day, I promise. So let's talk about measures. We're doing everything right. We've got humanity. We've planned our calendar. We've told a joke here and there. But we've got to know if it's successful. And that is hard. And it seems to me that it's an increasingly complex web of measures that we try and use. One of which is analyzing our lead gen. So Don, can you talk about maybe at a very high level, but in a practical way, which is hard to do, how you approach lead gen analysis? What are you looking for? Let me ask a more precise question. What are you looking for when you're analyzing lead gen?
Well, I can tell you that it used to be just lead count. And then it became, the conversation moved towards the quality of them and were they qualified. But if you're going a step further, you're taking a look at, well, are these leads coming from our current customers or are they coming from prospective customers? And really getting the percentages down. And is that changing based on time of year? Is it changing based on the campaigns that you're running? What's the overall score for the course of the entire, promotional year? And then you can really start to make some smarter decisions about your marketing spend, based on, are we getting just leads from everyone who already loves us? Or, are those even leads? Would we call them leads? So focusing on those types of things and making sure you're measuring them and adjusting your campaigns appropriately, I think is critical.
And how do you go about setting goals for that kind of lead gen, whether it's identifying the lead, the origin of the lead, or who it represents, customer versus prospect? I mean, Derek, I know you do a lot of goal setting with your clients. What are some of the things that this room needs to pay attention to when it comes to setting goals as it relates to measures?
Yeah, I think that's a step that's, again, critical and maybe not given as much time up front, is to define what the goal truly is. I think it's really easy for us to say, I want to drive leads or I want to build awareness, but going another step or two of defining what that really means. I mean, I think Don just had some really good examples for if the goal is lead generation, how many? How do you define as a quality lead? Are they converting? And maybe that's not your job if you're in marketing, but it's been sales. So I think defining the goal, it's tough. There's a lot of talk about ROI. It's so difficult to measure in this market. I think there's kind of some broad categories of goals: awareness, driving traffic to the site. You might want to call that awareness. You might want to call that, other names. There's a million names for things. But I think sitting down and defining goals and get to a point where you are really trying to attach some kind of baseline. So if you did a campaign last season, last back-to-school season, do some analysis ahead of time, figure out where the bar is, and then your goal can go from there. You want to obviously drive more leads than last year, or more quality leads, or other kind of metrics. But I think taking a little bit of a look in the past and then trying to set goals from there is a key step. That at least can get you kind of started. And again, it can be very overwhelming. And I know simplicity is kind of on the slide, so we can probably all chime in on that one. But keep them very smart, specific, measurable, accurate, or attainable, et cetera, that acronym. But simple and define them ahead of time.
I would just add to that real briefly that you can't underestimate the value of testing your different campaigns, especially as it relates to lead generation. Test what works. Maybe you had the greatest white paper in the world and you had a wonderful campaign and you asked people to give you all kinds of their information, tell name, title, and school that they're with in order to download that. Maybe you hardly had any lead gen at all. And maybe if you test that out and then say, well, maybe if we didn't ask them for their job title, or maybe we didn't ask for this, do you see that lead generation really jump? So, be sure that you're testing.
So if you're testing, you're looking for incremental gains, you're trying to keep it simple. I mean, show of hands, do you predict how many leads you expect in a given week? Show of hands, anyone? You. Do you want to come up? No, okay. Yeah. So that's interesting. So is that feasible, given that none of us seem to be doing it, or at least willing to admit it at this point? Do we have the resources as an industry to go out and say, you know what, based on last year, based on the content marketing, based on this, we should generate X number of leads? Is that feasible?
It was very predictable for me in my job, based on, again, what we did the prior year, what our marketing spend was going to be. Were we going to do more campaigns? Were we going to hit more emails? A variety of different variables. But I think you can predict within, say, maybe 10% whether or not you're hit your number.
So it's possible. Yeah. It's possible. So we're going to get to social as our next theme. But Rebecca, what is the one the one measure you keep coming back to week after week to know whether or not you're doing a good job?
I actually lean towards engagement rates, but that's because I focus a lot on reach, I focus a lot on social, and I focus a lot on whether or not they're actually touching and involved with your product in some way. Those things at the open part of the funnel, right? That's what gets you to your lead and gets you to the sale.
What does an engagement rate mean?
So it depends on the channel, but I would say, if you've got something, in the case of Facebook, you're talking about likes, shares, comments. If you're talking about Twitter, you're talking about likes and favorites and retweets.
And are those progressively more important? So a share is more valuable than a like?
Yes.
Okay, good. Do you all think that way? I guess? I don't know. That's something to think about, how we place value on the different activities that your prospects and your customers conduct in the context of your brand. So that's worth paying attention to. One quick thing about measures. When do you just throw them out? Brian?
Well, I'm a big believer in kind of going with your gut. And I think we get asked the question a lot, what's the ROI? What's the ROI? I oftentimes like to think, can you really afford not to do something? And I'll use social media as an example. And I think everybody struggles with proving the ROI on doing something through Twitter or doing a Facebook or some sort of digital social campaign. And clearly the conversations we're having the next 2 days, a lot of that revolves around social media. So there's something there, there's something working. And I think it's okay to trust your gut and explore some of that. I'm not saying ROI is not important and that you should abandon it, but ask yourself, can you afford not to get into a social media campaign, for example, as part of a fully integrated plan? And I think you'll find that once you do get into it, that you'll eventually see either impressions or engagements, that you'll see a return on your investment.
Corey.
It's sort of the beauty of an integrated program. You can have different channels going at once, and it's something that I've been thinking about lately, which is about breadth of reach versus depth of reach. And we're doing a street team program for one of the projects that I'm working on right now. And we literally have teachers in different regions who are ambassadors for the brand that we're working with. And that's not something we're going to be able to capture on a one-sheeter that allows you to go to the CEO and say, here's our measure. But it is something that will create sort of loyalists and ambassadors for that brand for years to come. And so, if you think about each part of your integrated program as a way to kind of get at different objectives, and it all ultimately works together in totality, then that's maybe one case within that overall integrated program where you say, let's throw out, the measures just a little bit here, and let's get human. Let's get people down in the, in the regions. I think someone mentioned
Seems to me
local
what
earlier.
you're talking about is we need to use measures to plan our next steps. Occasionally, we toss those out, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't measure it as you go. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right.
So sometimes you just got to dive headlong in. I think the key thing that I'm also hearing is that you need to measure as you go to see if your golden gut really is working. Is that right? Okay, good. I'm okay with that. The last piece, and again, you got the short shrift here, is about media. How do you measure that? Because I've been with a number of CEOs who say we're paying how much for PR, and what am I getting in terms of sales? And that often seems like an unfair calibration of measurement, but I don't know. If I was the CEO, I might be asking that question. So what are the measures you're looking for in media, Don?
You're looking for placement, but you can also, there's a variety of different tools out there to really measure sentiment. And if you're getting positive sentiment online, I would encourage people to investigate the different tools that are out there for that, because it is measurable.
What's the tool that you like?
Great question. Let me think about it.
Okay, think about it. Come find him afterwards. He's going to have 6 or 7 tools ready for you.
After a couple of beers, I'll have maybe 10.
All right, we're going to go into speed round now because we only have a few minutes left. But our last theme looks at social, which is just one of those things that, like Brian said, you can't afford not to do it, so you might as well do it well. So let's get a few ahas from social. And before that, we're going to show you, we have one more after this, the control tab. Anyone use this? Show of hands? Yeah, this is a good one, right? This has saved me hours toggling through applications. It's a big one. So I'm a big fan, not going to lie to you. So let's talk about social, because we all do it. Some of us are clumsy at it, but we're getting better. So let's look at some of the keywords that have come up in social. Stephanie, how do you get relevant in the world of social media? It seems like we've talked about human interest. We've talked about using everyday language. What are some of the other things that we can do to be relevant in the world of social?
I think the most important thing to do is to always remember that it should be a conversation. So I was thinking a lot about the EdNet conference. How many of us got up here and did our little 30-second intro last night? Anyone? Okay. So you had your 30 seconds, and then you sat and you listened to a lot of your other colleagues here in the room do their 30 seconds. Maybe you took some notes and said, oh, I want to talk to that person. Ooh, that sounds good. That's what I'm looking to do. Imagine if you then just modified your 30-second intro and you went up to everyone you wanted to talk to and said your 30-second intro, handed them your card, and then walked away. And you did it over and over again throughout the entire conference. That is the equivalent of just putting product information on all of your social channels. Here's another product pitch. Here's another product pitch. You want to have a conversation with people here at EdNet. You want to be having a conversation with teachers on social media. So you want to put some, get a presence out there, which I'm sure many of you already have, but do a lot of listening. What are the conversations that are happening? How does your area of expertise fit into those conversations? And how can you join the conversation in a way that's going to be relevant and meaningful to teachers?
So, Rebecca, one of the things I advise clients is to get on and start getting social, but in a collegial way. So if they're commenting on things, they're not doing it necessarily as representatives of their company or to position themselves. I'm kind of exposing myself. Is that good advice I'm giving?
I think so. I mean, I think it's funny. I just was listening when Steph was talking. I was thinking, that's authentic. Again, having the conversation that's a real authentic one. It's not jumping into a conversation that's happening and saying, oh, have I got a product for you? I'll help you. Somebody said earlier they seem like snake oil salesmen. That response, as a company, we're trying to tell you, here's how you can use our product to solve your problem. It's different from a conversational tone, and I think it's important to move towards that, especially when you're talking about the products.
So what happens, though, I've been on enough websites, blogs, Facebook pages to know when someone asks a question and there's 0 comments. I always feel bad for that blog post. Has anyone ever seen this? God, that's a great blog, and apparently no one's commenting. So what do? Do you feed that? Do you go tell your friends, hey, Mom, could you please go post a comment? I'm looking pretty lonely out there. What do you do about that? What do you do? Somebody. Yeah, anybody. Do you go and create a fake profile and
No.
start answering?
No.
Right.
But I mean, in my case, I probably tend to do things like share to people that I tag directly, who I know that it'll impact, especially when it comes to something like Facebook. I will say, we've got a post that I'm really interested in sharing, and I'm just going to call you out, and I'm going to tag all of my teacher friends who are who might care. I think that feeds that kind of exposure
Well,
in
and
a better way.
that's part of the work of it. You can't expect to start a Facebook page today and then post, a link to a blog post on it in 3 days and get all of this engagement. There is that building process, the building of the conversation, inviting people in who are the people that you want to target, okay, that right segmentation, getting them involved. It can be a slow process. It's a process of building, and it takes time, and it takes dedication to that relevant, authentic content. And when they start to trust you, it's a trust-building exercise. That's as you build, so that your blog post isn't so sad when you post it. But it's a building process.
So we all want to avoid sadness in social. I get it. And it seems to me, though, that we under-resource this quite a bit. And at what point is a company big enough, Don, to actually have the resources to do this? Not just the summer intern who comes in for a while and just does stuff for a while because we think they're young and smart, and turns out they're not. They're just young. So what resources do we need to put into play here to make this actually successful?
Speaking from personal experience, again, it's the people who are really passionate and knowledgeable about particular areas in the education space, but I had particular success in bringing on some young people that were journalism majors because they can write very eloquently and they can talk about a subject matter and engage your customer, whether you have the 140 characters on Twitter, so maybe you don't need a journalism major there, but maybe they choose just the right 140 characters. But in a place like Facebook or LinkedIn, where they can go much further, it's ideal, I think. But also, I have unfortunately seen education brands that have some decent-sized followings who have customers writing to them or prospective customers who the brands don't answer back. And imagine, what's that old saying? You get one chance to make a first impression, right? And imagine that educator had some sort of critical issue or a question that could potentially lead to a sale, and they've asked that brand that question, and there's no one there. No one is answering them or taking too long to answer them. So you have to resource appropriately, and you have to sometimes share the load in some of the smaller organizations, but not having someone, as you get a little larger, not having someone dedicated to social is potentially a huge misstep.
Now, one of the things to amplify your social prowess is to connect it to email, but that sounds like sorcery, Derek. I don't know exactly how that works. When you talk about connecting email and social activities, what do you mean there?
So what I'm really talking about with that is nurturing, your leads, which really kind of in English is continuing a conversation. So I'm sure we're all using email marketing a lot and probably seeing dwindling results as more and more years go on and more millions of emails show up in our inbox. So social and email, the tools that exist now are really powerful. So taking those folks that are continuing to open your email, hopefully you're keeping that email conversation going, and hopefully it's relevant and it's based on value and all things we've been saying, but taking those folks and targeting them specifically using the tools that Facebook and Twitter have, custom audiences, tailored audiences, upload that list of your customers, your top-tier prospects, if you've ranked your leads, and message them directly on social media. People are, all over all these digital channels, and we've talked about right time, right place. Early in the morning works really well, late at night might work well, weekends. So just trying to leverage the channels, keep the conversation going. We tend to sort of think in channels which are, we want to kind of avoid and think more integrated. So really just trying to kind of leverage everything together and have these channels pull together to the same audiences.
No, I'm showing some of the limits to my knowledge, which are very severe limits. But what eludes me is I understand we can go to you and others to get email information. I just don't understand how we get Twitter handles or Facebook profiles en masse. Is that possible?
Well, there's tools that those platforms have where if you have a customer list of email addresses, you can upload that directly into Twitter, send a tweet just to those folks. You don't even need to necessarily have their handle.
Did you all know that already?
I will add that it has to be a sizable enough population to match, because in Twitter, if it's under 500, you won't be able to create that audience. And then also there's some interesting data issues where you may have your list of where they are in school, but if you think, again, they're humans, right? So you might have your work email registered with Twitter, but you may have your at-home address registered, probably do, with Facebook. So trying to figure out ways to get to the data, to match it, to make sure that you're getting the full picture of who your customers are, who the potential customers are, and getting a one-to-one match kind of situation where you know who they are, where they're behaving, where they're most likely to respond, is an important piece of it. I don't know if that...
Yeah, that's really helpful. It's really interesting. At this point, I'd invite, is there any questions from the audience or things that you'd like to cover again? Anything come up? I'll give you a minute to think about it, because I want to show you another one, which is another one your associates will use quite a bit as you walk by, probably to close down their social media. Here's a question.
For those of you who use YouTube videos, do you spend the time to actually upload the closed captioning correctly?
So the question was about, for those of you who use YouTube videos, do you spend the time to upload closed captioning correctly? Sounds like the answer is no.
Corey's going with no.
I'll say it. I think it's a best practice.
So.
I think it's a great idea. Why would you limit getting your message out? If that's just another way that you can do it, I would highly recommend that you do it. Take the time.
We did a campaign for a customer, and we created a specific version of the video for Facebook, and it was probably not closed caption, but we did input some text in the animation, just because Facebook doesn't automatically play sound. So I know it's not to your question of YouTube, but it's definitely feels like a best practice, and probably not enough folks are doing it.
Okay, that's a good takeaway. Thank you for that question. Any other questions come up? Okay, I'm going to share with you one more, which is from my Mac. This is Command, whatever that little symbol is above your tab or caps lock key is. Anyone know this trick? Toggles between windows within an application. So if you're like me and at the end of the day you have 15 Word docs open and you're like, damn it, where's that one that I was working on? This just allows you to flip through them. That's a true life changer. That's a really good one. So I took away a number of ahas. I took like 37, and we were going for 30, so I feel pretty good about that. And I hope you took a number as well. I mean, not the least of which was paying attention to who our audience is and how we find them, ensuring that we actually have a calendar laid out. I would say not only month by month, but week by week. And then wouldn't it be interesting to start putting in measures for each of those weeks so that year over year you could find out what your goals are, whether it's across your different messaging strategies or even employing in a channel like social. There's a number of ahas that I've taken from this group. So I hope you'll join me in thanking this group for their time. And thank you.